Okay, so we started yesterday talking about Arvis or Ma'ariv, the evening service, and I'd like to just take a look here on page 118 where the evening service begins with a series of verses. So we've got a psalm here, right? So we've got two verses here in the beginning. Then we have a psalm here with a few extra verses, right? So we've got Psalm 134, and then a collection of other verses that follow right here in this paragraph. And then you have the three verses which we're familiar with, hopefully from the morning service, and the afternoon service from the Karbanos, something we say a number of times a day. These three verses here that are recited three times each. So we open the evening service with V'hu Racham. Now, the customs vary from among the communities as to what exactly the order, the sequence, and what exactly is actually said in the beginning of Arvis, the beginning of Ma'ariv. But this obviously follows the Alter Rebbe. This is the Alter Rebbe's Siddur. The Alter Rebbe's version of it, of the text, goes in this order. So we open with V'hu Racham. Why do we open with V'hu Racham? So V'hu Racham is a verse with 13 words, and they correspond to the 13 attributes of mercy. So why do we recite the V'hu Racham, which is that God is compassionate and forgives sin? Why do we open the evening service with this verse? So number one, because we don't bring an offering at night, right? We know we mentioned that we have the morning and afternoon service represent or correspond to the two sacrifices, but there's no sacrifice that's brought at night. And the sacrifices that are brought in the morning and the evening, in the afternoon, are brought to atone. So there's no atoning sacrifice for the evening, and so therefore we recite this verse for atonement. Another reason is because, as we mentioned, there are 13 attributes of they correspond to the 13 attributes of mercy, and the evening, the Kabbalah tells us, is a time of judgment, and since it's a time of harsh judgment, so we open the evening after nightfall, after that time of judgment, Midas Hadin, starts to be flexed, let's say, in the evening. So we open with God being compassionate. And so that's the reason we open up with this verse, or some of the reasons we open with this verse. Then we have a Psalm 134, and then a collection of other verses. And the purpose for these verses is to mention the value, as we say, it's those who stand in the house of God at night. So you see a direct connection thematically with the evening service, that it's night, that we're standing in the house of God, we're standing in prayer. And also, we talk here about the value of studying Torah in the evening, right? Balayla shira imi, right? So that by in the evening, I study, and there's a Jewish tradition that we sit in the study hall and study in the evening. So people have studying time that they study in the morning, time they study in the evening, and traditionally in the evening is between Mincha and Ma'ariv. They take time to study, and when they would take time to study. So this is a reference to that, and that obviously relates to what we said before about the evening and judgment, and we spend that time in Torah study. So that's something that's highlighted and mentioned right at the beginning of the evening service. And then we go to half Kaddish. Also, the three verses here talk about confidence in God, trust in God, which again obviously relate to this theme, especially in the night, the dark, in the time of judgment. That's a time certainly to recall God's providence. And then we have Kaddish and then Baruch Hu here on page 119. So in many communities, they just start with Baruch Hu. They don't even recite a half Kaddish beforehand. The reason they do that, it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, that you don't say Kaddish, you just jump straight into Baruch Hu. That's because traditionally what they used to do in the shuls was they would have the mincha, the afternoon service, and from the afternoon service, they jump right into the evening service, and maybe they would study afterwards. But then once that custom started to take root, that they would study in between, and that you wouldn't go transition from mincha right into Ma'ariv. So therefore, you can't rely on a Kaddish that you said at the end of Mincha. It needs sort of its own Kaddish. You don't just jump into Baruch Hu. So since we have it separate now, today, since this is standardized, so for us, even if we're doing Mincha Ma'ariv together, we would still recite these verses, and then we would recite Kaddish. Another reason we recite these verses also actually is because we don't want to recite Kaddish cold. The halacha is that you don't recite Kaddish without having preceded by reading some verses from Mikra, from Tanakh, and so therefore we preface the Kaddish with these verses and with the full Psalm at that as well, so that we can jump into the Kaddish and then into Baruch Hu.